War. The Cold War was for public consumption, including the fall of the wall. Human genetics, and this is from geneticists themselves, and I was taught this many years ago. We have 23 genes they call alien. They're not talking about alien meaning from aliens out there. They're saying genes that are not found in any other primate. And the 5th and 3rd chromosomes are fused together. If those happen, because I have a daughter with Down syndrome and I know genetics backward and forward, minor changes in genes are lethal. So our genes have been modified. We are not related directly. We have been tampered with. We've been modified. We even have an expiry date like a toy. So we wind down and our genes switch off the cell divisions. And I'm going to do the keynote presentation on my current theory, which I was given literally by the Most High, to the World Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine this December in Las Vegas on the new theories of anti-aging. God, as he said in Isaiah, when he came as Yeshua HaMashiach, the first time he spoke in the synagogue, he said, though they die at 100, it shall be as the years of a child. God will restore the years, but he's going to restore the spirit of man first by a transformation. He said, I will take your hearts of stone, which are the 10 Commandments, because the 10 Commandments are there to condemn you, because Israel didn't keep the commandment or the covenant. They didn't own the land, and they don't own Israel. They only have the right to be in the land if they're in covenant with the Most High. So we have an abomination. We have the Sabbatean labor Zionists who are killing the Torah Jews who want to return in spiritual covenant. And then the great Aliyah will not just be a trickle of thousands, but of hundreds of millions. Then we will have a world where there will be no more religion except for dance and recipe cards, and we will eat food together and dance and no more kill each other because we have different skin colors or religions, or we think we speak about a different God when we are all brothers and sisters. The sudden appearance of civilization and temples and the ancient technologies of medicine, science, and agriculture. The human genome itself. Now I'm going to talk about some things that are going to happen, and this is hard science. Some of it is classified sources, some of it is public sources, and you can check this out. And the PowerPoint will be posted up tomorrow, and of course my DVD, and I talk about these with many scientists. Some people come on my show under pseudonyms, and they're inside these agencies. The Nemesis dwarf star returned at the time of the Exodus. In fact, we have pretty good evidence that, and this is part of the predictions, this is not a prophecy, this is a scientific prediction, that 3,490 roughly years ago, in that range, during the time of the Exodus of the Hebrews, that God gave this knowledge to Moses and told him to go to the Pharaoh and say it was time for the Jews to leave. And the Santorini volcano that exploded, that dropped debris and caused the cataclysm of the sequential ecological catastrophes that were the plagues of Egypt, you can think about them logically. They're all ecological catastrophes, one following the other. Well, we have proof now that the South Pole telescope that was put there in 2007 that picks up the cosmic background radiation. We have proof of the Chandra X-ray telescope in the winter, spring of 2010, that there is evidence that there may be, in this object may be causing perturbations in the asteroid belt between Jupiter and Mars. We have the launch of the Sophia German-made telescope on the Boeing 747 just in March, that now at 40,000 feet can see unobstructed objects that can generate heat. We have Dr. Harrington's death after announcing the approaching dwarf star. And we're not talking about Planet X. It's not a planet. We're talking about a returning dwarf star. And we are in a trinary star system. The definition of a star is an object that could have become a star, or it gives off more radiation in the bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum than it receives. So Jupiter, by definition, giving off more infrared heat and more X-rays, is a star. So just by that, we're a binary. And with this dwarf star, which comes below the ecliptic, which is below the plane of the solar system, we are in a trinary system. This is put up by the Americans, the cosmic background radiation. This is the Chandra X-ray Observatory telescope. And that data, by the way, came out that in 2007, X-ray observations made by Chandra revealed that the object that they thought was a supernova had increased in size 16%. So there's a special team of astronomers, and you can find it out, it's called G1.9, called the Star Viewer team, that believes that there's evidence that this object is now entering the inner solar system below the ecliptic plane, so it's below the southern hemisphere. And that's why all of these astronomical things, including the Vatican, are all in the Chile and southern hemisphere. They know it's coming. It comes back all the time. You can see it in the ancient Egyptian pyramids called the destroyer, the winged destroyer. You can see it in the ancient philosophies of the Indians of Kali. You can see all of these things. You can see the stories in the Hopis about the blue Kachina and the returning, fire god. All of these things are coming, and they know they're happening in our day, which is why they're building off-world space platforms. There is a, if you want to call it, third agenda of colonies on Mars, because they know the cataclysm is coming to this Earth. This is a Spitzer infrared telescope, Sophia, and this is an example. And it's not Nibiru as we talk about where we have these giants. The Nibiruans have never left. The Nibiruans are here. They're among us. They're below us. And there's other creatures even in this Earth. And one of my scientist friends, who was this technician taking care of the Aurora Space Fleet, told me after they did psychological testing on him, and they told him that people can't handle the fact that there have been reptilian beings that have lived in this world for millions of years, and that they are living among us. And they can't believe that, in fact, our whole culture is based on the idea of psychic control and avataring every individual using trans-dimensional reptilians. The word human is a Welsh word meaning hue, meaning serpent, and men. So when the 1215 Magna Carta was made by King John and the royals, they simply were using the ancient technologies of mind and spirit to control man, to make them slaves, which goes far beyond just marketing. It means that you become a human when your spirit gets literally invaded like a parasite, and your husk of your body is literally controlled like an avatar. And that's happening. And in fact, the greatest power you can get in these high-level Masonic organizations is not human sacrifice or sexual magic rituals or killing millions. It's to curse your own seed, your own descendants. That's the greatest thing that will advance you more in the powers of darkness. For any lettered agency, government agency, whatever, is to curse your own descendants. Look at the list of the Xi'an telescope, a collaboration of US, China, Europe, and Australia. And the IRES, the infrared telescope. All of them have found evidence that this nearby protostar is coming. Pioneer saw this back years ago in 1984, and it was announced by NASA and then quickly stopped. Now I want to go over some cycles, and these are cycles that were first brought up by people like Dr. Milankovitch. The first one is the 105,000-year cycle, and if you listen to my programs with people like Robert Felix, who wrote his book, his website is Ice Age Now, great place, and his two books are Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps, because at every 11,500 years the magnetic field collapses and reverses. And guess what? That reversal started in '97 when we started passing through the galactic plane, because we go right up and down through the galactic plane. Every 11,500 years we pass through this gravitational well, this photon belt, this debris belt, and as we pass through it, the magnetic flux fields, because the torsion field of the cosmos, of the galaxy, has one direction above the galactic plane and another direction below, so the magnetic reversal has started, and that we will pass the midpoint on what day? December 21st, 2012. We will pass the midpoint. And that's why these civilizations that played in the ball court could see this hoop where the alignment of the black hole in the center of the galaxy, which, by the way, the Gesellschaft and Thule Society called the Black Sun, the Society of the Black Sun. They would see the alignment of that in the center of the galactic plane and the center of our sun and Earth. They know these gravity waves, these gravitational waves, just like the increased earthquakes occur with solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, high tides, and we call these equinoxes, the spring and fall equinoxes. Solar cooling. Right now we've had only 5% of the normal amounts of sunspot activity. And of course the thing that drives ice ages is increased rainfall, and what's happening now? The volcanoes under the oceans are 95% of the rainfall in the world is increasing as we're heading toward, and now we have what's called the 105,000-year cycle, where you go from a circular orbit when the Earth cools to a stretch or elliptical orbit when it warms. And guess where we are now? We are now circular. We are now at the 105,000-year cycle for another ice age. We're also, every 11,500 years, when we pass through the galactic plane, there are increased earthquakes and volcanism. The continents and the changes in the position of the magnetic pole moves in advance of the position of the rotational North Pole. And since the 20th century, the North Pole moved at 10 kilometers per year towards north-northwest out of Canada towards Siberia. In '97, it started moving at 41, and now it's up to 43 kilometers per year moving towards Siberia. We have a pretty good idea where and how far the pole will move when the North Pole rotation moves. And we're not talking about moving the continents. We're talking about moving the position of the rotational axis of the Earth. It's two different things. The magnetic pole anomaly started about 7, 8 years ago for Sirius, but it started back in '97 off of the Ross Ice Shelf in Antarctica. And now it's spread since last year from Antarctica all the way to South Africa at the Radiomagnetic Research Facility there. And off the east of these volcanoes, the Jökulfocal, the Hekla and the Kitla volcanoes in Iceland are blowing their top. That anomaly is expanding where it's now South Pole in that zone of the oceans in the northern Arctic Circle. And off the Ross Ice Shelf is actually North Pole now. So these things are real. You can check it out yourself. You can see the decrease in the magnetic field. The carbon nanobuckyballs occurs at this 11,500 years. Iridium, beryllium, hydrocarbon layers in the rocks of the world. The reverse of the magnetic flux field is known by all geologists. Movement of the continents occurs discontinuously, and the appearances of species and the death of many of the species, especially larger ones, larger than about 25 kilograms, massive die-off, mastodons, with their tusks pulled out of Baffin Island, 26 feet long, that died with food frozen in their mouth. We estimated how cold they had to be frozen that quickly. It would be equivalent to being dropped into liquid nitrogen, where the troposphere collapsed 50, and dropped the temperature to 160 to 200 degrees below zero, just like the day after tomorrow. The Milankovitch cycle is tied to the tilt as well as the Earth, and this gives you an idea of the axis. And what it does is the North Pole axis rotates between these three stars, the Vega, Alpha Draconis, and our current North Star that we have now. Okay, in the precessionary cycle, this is what happens to the galaxy. The galaxy is called the Orion arm of our galaxy, moves up and down like a carousel across this galactic plane. It's a debris belt, it's a gravitational well, and it's a place where objects that are in hyperelliptical orbits like our dwarf star cousin, the Nemesis dwarf star, exists. And of course, there's other cycles. There's the 360-year cycle, which caused the historical collapse of all the civilizations over the last 6,000 years when the cooling occurred during the Middle Ages. When the ancient Sumerian civilization fell, they all occurred at these Maunder minimum type cycles, roughly when Jupiter and Saturn align times 2, which happens every 180 years times 2. There's a cooling of the Earth, and all of these, of course, are tied to gravitational waves from Jupiter and Saturn aligning, causing increased volcanism and increased rainfall. All of these occurred, and guess what? All of these cycles are now ready in our day for a major ice age. This looks like the little ice age there. You can see the cooling and the time again for another global cooling. And the River Thames, of course, froze every year during that time. The Vikings left Greenland. Now, of course, they're saying Greenland is having a high over there. But these anomalous switches where it's high and low, and of course the globalists continue to push through their mind control magazines to say that, no, this isn't real, that we're not going to have an ice age. Just like that, that movie last night that talked about this. Volcanism and aerosols, the net effect is to increase. Maybe people remember Mount Pinatubo and El Cajon, Mount Pinatubo 91 and El Cajon. These cause global cooling. And the aerosols, the net effect is to cool the Earth, not to warm it. Okay? So that's how serious this is. And of course, they talk about carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Well, greenhouse gases dissipate very quickly, but if you put carbon dioxide in a chamber, it's going to stay on the bottom. The most important greenhouse gas is water vapor, but guess what it does? When you put out these vapors in the upper atmosphere, they reflect light. They don't warm it. And the thing that warms our Earth is our sun. And volcanism from the below. If you're going to have the Ross Ice Shelf break off, you have the volcanoes below the shelf become active. There's a Gakkel Range that's 1,500 kilometers long in the North Atlantic, northern hemisphere in the Arctic Circle. 1,500 miles of volcanoes as tall as the Swiss Alps, with water coming out of them at 700 degrees. Millions and millions of gallons in some of these venting areas. And you can see specials. Go look at it yourself. And Mount Pinatubo, so with these volcanoes, the ones, for example, in 1783, the blowing up of the Hekla and the Kitla volcano